and it's a game changer. So I don't know that there is a ceiling quite yet.
That's great.
We do have a tradition on this show, Jennifer, and Tim pretty much drafted most of the questions here, but we do have a tradition that when someone says, great question, we acknowledge that it was Tim that wrote that question. So he got to both ask the question and he wrote the question. So I just want to acknowledge it. Believe it or not, after dominating last year, I think Tim is leading in this category this year. It's a very important statistic in the Wait What record book. So we have to make note of that.
At heart, we are 12-year-old boys.
I thought we were going to have like shots of espresso or something. I mean, in the old days that would have been tequila, but.
Welcome to Wait What? Sports Quiz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast that takes an often cynical, occasionally irreverent, and at times even a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, David Parro.
And I'm Tim McGee.
Oh, partner, it's good to be back from the little break, or as I like to call it, an excursion.
Yeah, to all our devoted listeners, please don't pay the ransom. We escaped.
I was pretty focused there for a while, launching a new F1 sponsorship, and you were, it seems, on your podcast media tour, which I enjoyed following. But I think a few big stories may have broken since we last recorded.
Hold. Expensive Winos was a side project.
I like side
of
projects.
Keith Richards back in the late 80s when he was having his sort of issues with Mick Jagger. And I don't want to suggest for a second we have had any issues, but Keith Richards was not going to sit around and do nothing. So he started a side project called The Expensive Winos. I suggest to you and our listeners, go check out the album Talk is Cheap on Spotify. Roots rock. I don't know if there's any reggae on it, but it's...
Well, that's where he comes from, certainly.
Yeah, some blues, some roots rock. It's pretty good.
I think you actually recorded one of them before we even went on break, but I'm just teasing you. I've done that. And listen, we both stayed busy during the excursion.
Yeah, no, I joined our mutual friend Steve Raquel, who's got a nice podcast, and then a young man who I met through his grandmother, believe it or not.
You don't need to go any deeper into that story.
I'm going to, because it sounds a bit odd just leaving it hanging like that. Two dear friends in our industry, Stephanie Jacobson and Mike McCann, not the lawyer, Mike McCann, and I were out to breakfast. We held the door open for an elderly couple. We started chatting them up. They learned we were in the sports business. The grandmother said, "Oh, my grandson is graduating from Ohio State. Can I have him reach out to you?" The young man did. We struck up a friendship. We've kept in touch, and he had a great idea for a podcast called A Fork in the Road, where he talks to industry people about decisions they made in their career that led them to where they are. I think the concept is brilliant. You should check it out. Jared Pine is his name.
I think the lesson there is that perhaps we should have had a theme behind our show when we originated it. But here we are, 150 plus episodes in. So Tim, what's on your mind though? We'll actually get the show started now.
Chaos and Anarchy isn't a show theme. Well, let's ease back into it. Let's talk about something we talk about quite often, which are ratings. NBA first round, some great series, most notably in my mind, Philly coming back from 3-1 and defeating the Celtics. The Knicks sort of getting a wake-up call after Game 3 of their Hawks series, going down 2-1 and then just blowing past the Hawks the rest of that series and the Sixers in the second round. But first round did average 4 million fans per game. Some of the games, you got to look for them, right?
Yeah.
They're on ESPN, they're on ABC, they're on NBC, they're on Peacock, they're on Prime. I do find that a bit frustrating at times, but that's good. But the NHL, my goodness, some great first round. Buffalo getting past the first round of the playoffs in the first time forever. The Canadiens getting through the first round. Those ratings are up 70%.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the continued power of sports, particularly as an advertising driver. And the upfronts that are happening now.
Yeah.
Kicked off strong with sports leading the way for NBC and Fox, because that's in a way is where the power is. That's what advertisers continue to be interesting in, that live programming that only sports delivers. So it's obviously at a great place. Yes, probably somewhat boosted by the new world that we live in with Nielsen and the enhanced ability to capture data. And I've followed the NBA a bit closer on a personal level than I have the NHL. I will be the first to admit. But the best first round for the NBA in 33 years, just numbers that I think, and yes, it helps that, I think no one expected Boston to end up even in this series, although then they got upset by Philadelphia. So when Jason Tatum came back, I think they were tougher than people expected, because that's a really, really good team. And if the Knicks continue, I think the expectation now is that they'll certainly make it to the final, but who knows? Because they are playing that well, and I'm not sitting here trying to jinx them in any way. OKC sweeps their series against the Lakers, but those others are both 2-2. The Western Conference semi and the Eastern Conference semi are both 2-2. So both OKC and the Knicks will get a nice rest here as they await their opponent. But the games have been great. Defense is starting to be played, but I'm not totally surprised by the numbers, because I do think there's something, great star power that we're playing with, potentially the end of LeBron's career. But this OKC team is unbelievable. Obviously, Wemby in San Antonio, some big-time stars. The Knicks being the Knicks, and the power that they still, I think, elicit from fans. So yeah, it's been pretty amazing to see these. And when I took a peek at the numbers, I was like, wow, it's kind of nice to see that bearing out.
Yeah, listen, I'm all in on the Knicks bandwagon, but keep in mind that Detroit, if they should prevail against Cleveland, owned the New York Knicks this year during the regular season. And I know it's very different in the playoffs, but I guess my long-winded point, and hopefully I have one, is, don't punch your ticket to the NBA Finals yet if you're a Knicks fan.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. My only point is I think given how well they're playing, I mean, they're dominating teams.
Yeah.
And my brother's still a Sixers fan, and he lives outside of Philadelphia, although he likes the Knicks team because he's also a Villanova fan, and there's that connection with the Villanova players on the Knicks. When the Knicks went up 3-0, I was talking to him, and he said, "Yeah, I think the Sixers can pick one game off here." And I said, "I don't think so. I have a feeling this one's going to be a blowout." I was right on that one. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, they gave everything they had in that Boston series. But it was interesting. They showed the bench, and they showed Embiid, and they showed somebody next to him. And it took me a second to realize it was Kyle Lowry. So your brother does have that Villanova connection with. But I think, how old's Kyle Lowry? I don't think he's going to be on the bench next year.
No.
What do you got going on?
Well, listen, one of the subjects we've talked about probably the most on this show has been the situation in the world of golf, and particularly LIV, and all of the news that broke about PIF pulling out of their funding happened while we've been off. And so I wanted to address that because it brings up a huge challenge for Scott O'Neill in his leadership position with LIV. Since the changeover from Norman, they're moving toward trying to find investors, and I just don't. The product's not where it needs to be. I think this is going to be a bit of a tough lift. PIF was a perfect partner in a way because we always talked about just an unending amount of cash available to play it out as long as they wanted to, and I think they could have, but the tour won this if there was any sort of competition. And even though the tour was forced to make moves because of LIV, and I think we can all acknowledge that, Brian Rolap takes over at a time and starts making some moves that just cements the position. And if you look at how the LIV golfers perform, say, at the Masters, we have another major coming up this weekend with the PGA Championship being played outside of Philadelphia at Aronimink, nearby where I grew up. And the players other than DeChambeau, who's continued to be pretty adamant about it, they just all seem to be floundering. And so I will go back to my prediction from beginning of this year, which was one of my predictions was there would be nothing would happen in golf. There will be no merger because there's nothing to merge, and I still stand by that.
Your prediction is looking more and more prescient every day that goes by. I will say this, if anybody can save Live Golf, it's probably Scott O'Neill. But having said that, his role has fundamentally changed, right? Raising money is a very different skill set than running an ongoing sports entity. One of the things that I saw that he said was he thinks a lot of the value is in the teams. So do they take a more traditional approach to professional sports and sell franchises that then feed up to the parent organization and let them do that? Now, if you listen to Live, all of their metrics are up from last year: viewership, attendance, sponsorship revenue, media revenue, all of these things, merchandise and things like that. But it is a very tough road to hoe. The last thing I will say about this is Brian Roloff is now a great beneficiary of what the tour had to do before he came on, because now those top tier tournaments are getting sponsorship fees of $20 million. That's not going to go back down if Live goes away. I think they're going to have to think about, there's not many companies that can pay $20 million a week of exposure. And I know that's very greatly oversimplifying it, but that's what it is.
I want to make sure, because I agree with you. We both agreed that Scott was an unbelievable choice to helm Live Golf, brings over Chris Heck, another great operator and a great sports marketing person, someone that we both have a good amount of respect for. So they have some interesting people. I think the challenge, and I agree with you that the team focus is where they would go. Back a few years ago, the feeling was if Live survives, it becomes the team concept within the PGA Tour. While yes, their attendance seems to be somewhat raucous and a fun environment, and they have gone out, behind these pitches of the teams, and if you invest in a team or you invest in the league, you're basically investing in a team, and that's this model. It's an interesting model. I just don't feel that the excitement for that kind of team concept outside of things like Ryder Cup and President's Cup have followed suit. I still think the sport is about the individual player, and that's, I think, where they're going to struggle. But we also know that there are a lot of people with a lot of money that want to be in the sports business, and being in business with Scott O'Neill and the sport of golf, there are less interesting places to park your money, I suppose, than with that group.
Yes, but one of the things that makes events like President's Cup and Walker Cup and Ryder Cup, of course, so popular is the fact that you can't see them every week.
Yep.
So,
agreed.
To your point.
Agreed.
To wit.
It's why not every Olympic-style sport can have a professional league, just,
Sorry,
right
curling.
after the Olympics. Oh, the other thing, by the way, that, because one of the big things that DeChambeau was talked about was his presence as a social media star, and he's done great. It's been a huge help, I think, for Liv, and certainly for his own personal brand. We talked about that a little with Omar Kem when he was on before we took a break from GSE. But he had criticized the tour's policies. Well, Roloff just announced a whole new policy to encourage more, giving players more rights to utilize footage rather than just the one shot that they were allowed to do. And that has to change the calculus for someone like DeChambeau, who still obviously wants to compete against the best at the majors, if not weekly. Rory's come out again and talked about, listen, obviously the best players, if they want to be competing against the best, there's really only one place for them to be, and he's 100% right about that. And that's the tour right now. So, with Koepka going over and kind of folding back in as well as he has, Rahm doesn't seem to be able to answer the question whenever he's asked. And then, of course, the decision will be if some of those do choose to come back, what will the ultimate penalty be? Because that short window they had when Koepka came back to the tour is no longer in play. So that'll be an interesting decision that the tour makes when it comes to the penalties, because the players that stayed on it, they feel like something should be extracted even if they want some of those players back.
Yeah.
What else you got before we welcome a guest?
Yeah, let's talk quickly about college sports.
Yeah.
There's been some big news since you and I were on hiatus. The basketball tournament has expanded to 76 teams. So cue the dismay from team number 77 next year. The NCAA will make an extra $50 million.
But it doesn't have anything to do with that, does it?
No.
Just to give more schools more opportunity, right?
Yeah,
I like to just think of it as an expanded first four. So the opening round is just
the first 44.
for
Yeah.
first everybody.
Yeah. We talked about this on a show not too long ago. The Big 12 took a capital infusion from Redbird Capital. It was not a PE investment, but so far more than half the schools in the Big 12 have refused to take that money from Redbird Capital. I guess they believe that they can drive revenue as well, if not better, without having to be beholden to having that what is essentially a line of credit.
Yeah, I think the beholden word is quite important in that sentence, and I think that is probably freaking administrations out, because it's you're taking money and then they've got a little control on that, no doubt about it, in terms of how you operate, in terms of what the revenue projections are and so forth. So that has to be worrisome. I think eventually we'll see it happen a little more, and that'll be cracked. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating story that you brought up some weeks ago, and will continue to be interesting to follow.
Yeah, by taking that money, you're letting the proverbial camel's nose under the tent, I think. And then last but not least, just announced within the last day or two, the College Sports Commission, or CSC, which was set up to review NIL deals. And there have been a lot of complaints that they were slow and they were being a little bit capricious in their decisions. They upheld NIL deals to 18 University of Nebraska athletes, totaling $1 million. The school took them to arbitration. The arbitrators found in favor of the CSC. So it looks like, now whether this becomes precedent or not remains to be seen, but the CSC has some teeth in their enforcement efforts. And I think that's going to continue to sort of play a role in how these deals get done. Essentially what happened was Playfly took some of their money that they got through their deal with the University of Nebraska. They gave it to the athletes, and there was no quid pro quo, right? There was no services or anything that needed to be rendered by these athletes, which was, to me, looked like, at least on its face, as a non-lawyer, looked pretty blatant to me.
Yeah. No, I think that's where the precedent, I think, was established, and I think that's an important one. It kind of draws that line that we now know we can look at it from that standpoint, because that's been a bit of the joke, meaning it's not supposed to be pay to play, it's supposed to be pay for services. I actually like that, that it was ruled on from that standpoint. Obviously there will be appeals and so forth. I do think it sets a standard that will help guide what NIL was supposed to be. I'm not saying there won't be other things and other ways around, but fascinating case and a very important one, I think.
What do you say?
We could go on for a while longer on various subjects, but why don't we take a break now and welcome in our guests, and we'll be back on the other side.
It's time for our guest.
We are back, and we are so pleased to have our next guest on our first show back from spring break. Jennifer Van Dijk is the president of Boston Legacy FC of the NWSL. Jennifer has a long and storied career, both in and outside of sports. She started her career at the same place I worked, IMG, where she was in the consulting group, and then was a VP of digital strategy when digital wasn't even really a thing, if you think about it. She's taught at Boston University as an adjunct. She's spent time at the NBA, at Wasserman Media Group, the LA Clippers. She's done stints, as I said, outside of sports as the chief executive officer of Hoonigan, president of Dapper America, the NFT company, a company called Super Plastic. And now, as I said, she is the president of Boston Legacy. So, Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
Well, it's great to have you, Jen. So I'll just add my thanks for you joining us today. As Tim mentioned in the intro, after a nice solid career in sports, you had 3 stops as president or CEO at different companies somewhat outside before making this leap back in. Give us an overview of what really drove that decision to move back into sports in such a prominent way.
Yeah, I will tell you almost every day of my career, I've woken up and been incredibly thankful that I get to have a career in sports. And I never envisioned one outside of it. When I went back to Wasserman in 2018, I had the opportunity to create a new division within the company that helped athletes become digital influencers with social content. And Hoonigan actually was the media company owned by Ken Block, the rally racer and drift driver, who was actually outperforming every other athlete Wasserman had. And he had built a robust media and kind of, merchandise company on the back of YouTube, and they were looking for a CEO. And that became my opportunity really to go from being kind of an entrepreneur within big agencies to actually having full control of the keys. And it really was transformative for me in having that opportunity, still in sports, but not. And I got to tell you, it kind of was a bit of a drug when in the case of that, we sold the business within 18 months of me being there. And I was like, cool, let's do that again. And so it kind of became a drug around being an entrepreneur and startups. But really, as a couple of years happened and some different stops happened, I missed the sports business. And so I just missed the way it all works and the community of people that are part of it. And so when the Boston Legacy opportunity came about, it was a natural for me to pursue.
I hear people say this is a moment for women's sports, and I cringe at that term because a moment seems to suggest that it's fleeting or temporary or ephemeral. I'd like to think of it more as the time for women's sports. So what's the ceiling, if anything, for women's sports in general and the NWSL in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't know that there is a ceiling for it. I think there's a lot of economic opportunity and a lot of, I guess you could consider it catching up with some of the more established sports. And I only mean that by established in some of the ways of major broadcast agreements, major infrastructure in stadiums and venues and things. I think that is the incredible time that women's sports has in front of us, is that really great economic growth opportunity of teams managing their own stadiums, owning their own practice facilities, building their own assets that allow for all of those revenue streams that make, 100-year businesses really attractive. And that's where we are right now. We're just at the beginning of it. You see a big difference in teams and leagues that are able to invest in that type of infrastructure and that type of talent. And it's a game changer. So I don't know that there is a ceiling quite yet.
That's great.
We do have a tradition on this show, Jennifer, and Tim pretty much drafted most of the questions here, but we do have a tradition that when someone says, great question, we acknowledge that it was Tim that wrote that question, so he got to both ask the question and he wrote the question. So I just want to acknowledge it. Believe it or not, after dominating last year, I think Tim is leading in this category this year. It's a very important statistic in the Wait What record book, so we have to make note of that.
At heart, we are 12-year-old boys.
I thought we were going to have like shots of espresso or something. I mean, in the old days that would have been tequila, but
we know you're in the midst and very focused on the NWSL season right now, but we have some events coming up, obviously, namely the Men's World Cup, FIFA World Cup coming up here very quickly, and then the 2027 Women's World Cup. Curious as to how the Legacy are kind of leaning into that, how you may use the excitement building or these major events to help promote NWSL in general, and of course the game of women's football in the Boston area.
I mean, what is so great about global events like the World Cup and Olympics is they have a way of igniting the consciousness and the imagination of all countries involved, and especially obviously here where it will be in North America. Lucky enough to have lived in Los Angeles, a host city, and now also Boston. And I think the opportunity here is that there is such heightened awareness of soccer and any kind of soccer, right? National, club, etc., that people just get very excited. And for us, that is an opportunity to grow the brand and to grow our awareness. I mean, we played our first match ever, March 14th, right? 2 months ago, basically. And we are still very much in the awareness building of the club. And so what we'll be doing during June when, our team is off of matches for the break, but we'll be hosting, different player meet and greets. We'll be participating in a lot of viewing parties around town, engaging key fan segments, whether that be certain multicultural groups, who may have national teams playing in Boston or just might be very into the events, LGBTQ events around. We're going to be partners with something called Pride House here in Boston. So just a lot of different ways, and not exclusive to Boston. I would say really kind of trying to cut a wide swath around New England, down in Rhode Island, Connecticut as well. Just trying to capture some of that excitement and make people aware of the legacy and aware of what we stand for, because, it is unique and it is new, and I think it's an exciting time for everybody.
There may not be matches being played, but the league is not going dark, right? The clubs are not going dark. That's a myth. When we first met and worked together, you were part of what was affectionately known as the Cleveland Mafia at IMG. And seriously, though, it's a group of young, driven, really smart people within the organization that led the charge of IMG into things like digital marketing. I remember sitting in a meeting with Todd McCormick, Mark's son, and not understanding a single thing he was talking about. It was so far over my head. The only thing that gave me comfort was as soon as Todd was finished, Mr. McCormick put down his pen on his ever-present yellow legal pad and said, "Todd, I may be the stupidest person in the room, but I didn't understand a word you said." And to this day, I am never afraid to ask a question, because if somebody like Mark McCormick wasn't, I will not be. But I also remember thinking, well, at worst, you're the second stupidest person in this room, Mr. McCormick. And I tend to think that's not likely. But anyway, I digress. What was it like coming up at what was really the heyday of IMG, right? It was a great time to be at the company. There were some fantastic leaders there, whether it was Peter Johnson, Mr. McCormick, Bob Kane, Andy Pierce. You go down the line, it's like a hall of fame of sports marketers. What was it like for you being in the agency at that point?
I mean, I say this every day that I get a question about the start of my career. I got so friggin' lucky to be able to start my career with Todd McCormick and TWI Interactive at the time, right? Like, that was my way in to IMG. I started in their 45th Street office in Hell's Kitchen in 1998 on a $6 an hour internship, because they couldn't pay me because I had graduated from college. Or they had to pay me, because I had graduated from college. Otherwise, it just would have been for credit. And within 3 years, I was a vice president leading interactive, whatever interactive meant at the time, effectively translating for Todd in different ways. He remains to this day a friend and mentor. I still only understand about half of it. Brilliant, yeah, and so far ahead of the curve. But it really, I don't think any of us really knew it at the time, what was happening there that was so special. Of course, they had signed Tiger Woods a couple years earlier, the Williams sisters, Federer. I mean, they had the who's who of golf and tennis, plus. And I mean, there was some crazy shit going on around there. I will tell you, like, the stories of that Hell's Kitchen office for the first 2 years I was there was nuts. And, like, we didn't know any better. So we worked all night long. We worked all weekend long. We all got to know each other, love each other, hate each other. But I will tell you, some of my best friends in this business today are still there. And it was really kind of a full circle moment. This January, we sent our team down to IMG Academy to train for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, I remember when this place was like this big, not this big. and not owned by, 10 other billionaires. But yeah, just a really incredible moment and an incredible way to launch a career for sure.
Yeah, I think that 45th Street office was just haunted in a good way, with people like Barry Frank and
Hillary Mandel, who is still there, by the way.
Right? Who just, it was just unbelievable. Yeah, I'm
amazing.
I'm having a feeling of deja vu or melancholy, whatever it is, missing those days. But yeah, what a great time
I
to,
just want
be
to
part of
sit
that
back
agency.
and have you guys go on for the next 20 minutes just talking about this, because this is fascinating to me to hear all these names pop back up, like within that small, at least physical universe of that office. That's pretty amazing.
I don't want to
yeah.
speak for Jen, but I think I've probably shared most of the ones that are
Yeah.
good for,
Publishable.
or good for mixed company at this point.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that went on, it's just crazy.
No doubt about it. I mean, and 45th Street office was the office that people didn't really think about. It was the TV
We were
production
like the
office.
Island of Misfit Toys when I was there.
Completely.
It was
Completely.
the Verizon consulting team.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
like
that,
no rules.
I think this
Steve
is kind
Mayer
of,
was in that office,
See,
who's
this is
now
what I
chief
mean.
content officer for the
Yeah, very
NHL.
frank,
Wonderful
like
guy.
you said. Betsy Goff. I mean,
Yeah.
it was legends.
Jen Van Dyke.
I'm
Jeff
somewhat
Schwartz.
Yeah,
partly
Jeff
ready to
Schwartz.
ask the next question, but you guys can go on, because I'm finding this fascinating. So I can just sit here.
Jen's got a job she's got to do. We got to get her out of here.
You know.
All right. So, but hearing this talk about IMG actually makes me even more interested to ask the next question I wanted to ask is, you left IMG, you went to another agency that has since obviously become a giant global entity, and Wasserman, now the team, right? They're called the team now. But yeah, we all make the same head move when that is
It'll
mentioned.
always be Wasserman to me.
But it was clearly IMG was formed, kind of the culture built on Mark McCormick. And I guess to a degree, obviously Wasserman on Casey Wasserman, but they were doing a lot of acquisition and so forth. But what was that like, and kind of what was the motivation? And you did go with more of your focus that you had built at IMG on this digital content, which, as Tim pointed out in the introduction, was just an emerging thing at the time. So kind of take us through that. What was it like? How was that transition going to an agency which I have to imagine a very different culture?
Yeah, what was so interesting is IMG was even though they were headquartered in Cleveland, really a New York-based agency, right? And you felt it in the IMG culture. I left IMG after having moved out to LA and worked very closely with their action sports team in LA and kind of the West Coast consulting group. But even in LA, IMG still felt like an East Coast company. So it was really interesting going to Wasserman, because where IMG was so strong in individual sports, golf, tennis, etc., Wasserman had really built their strength on team sports. They had acquired Arn Tellum's agency in basketball. They were acquiring in football and baseball. And they were really kind of building from a representation perspective along that line. They also had just acquired Gary Stevenson's OnSport brand consulting group, and we're kind of integrating all of that in when I joined in 2008. It really had a lot of the sense of this kind of felt like a younger, in some ways better funded version of IMG, like kind of all over again, but in a team, at least team sport type of business. And I had actually started at Wasserman on the T-Mobile account team, speaking of, our love of wireless companies in sports, and was running all of their NBA investments when they had Charles and Dwayne and the league relationships, etc. And so really kind of that also started my love of basketball. But one thing I'll say very clearly is that I've been lucky to have incredible male leaders in my life at both agencies. Todd McCormick, really did give me a lot of opportunity and put me in a lot of rooms where I was able to, make my own impact early in my career. But Casey Wasserman has done something for women in this business that really no other agency has. And I will say, there's a lot of shit about Ghislaine Maxwell and all of those things. But when you really look at it, Casey has empowered women across the business that have taken incredible roles with real leadership and gone on to really great careers, some of which still at Wasserman, the team, and many across sports. And so I think in that sense, like culture is, for a woman in this business, how you find your own space and your own role. And I really loved the culture at Wasserman. It was really great.
We said a few. I'm sorry, David.
No, I was just going to say, having worked with Wasserman a fair amount myself as an agency for things that I was working on, I hear you on that, and you see it. They develop leaders quite well there, and I think they identify future leaders quite well, and try to move them up. So certainly could not disagree with anything you just said in that regard.
Yeah, certainly not least among them Elizabeth Lindsay, who runs a big
Completely.
part of the business there. Well, we said on the show about a month or so ago when this whole thing with Casey came up is that the best somebody can hope for having their name associated with Jeffrey Epstein is that they've shown poor judgment. Unfortunately, that's the best that somebody can hope for, and in this case, Casey's paying a much bigger price than that. But let's go back. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. You were at Wasserman. Obviously, you worked with T-Mobile in the league and all the great people at the NBA and another great IMG alum, Mark Perman,
Yes.
Charles's guy, one of the best. Yeah,
Yes.
one of the best. What was it about the sport of basketball that made you want to go back to the properties, or go to the property side, I should say, with Teambo and with the Clippers?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I had never played basketball. I had never really been early days Cavs fan is a tough road anyway. So, that wasn't happening. But through the T-Mobile relationship, I got to meet a lot of the people at the teams, like a guy like Ted Dalton here at the Celtics.
Past guest.
Fantastic, right? Drinking. Just like fantastic people, again, throughout that whole NBA ecosystem. And I got to really fall in love with the way the league and the teams and the business is structured across the ecosystem of basketball. And for me, at Wasserman, I really started to believe that there was a business in consulting teams and leagues on digital values, digital rights. Like, it was really frustrating to me how they were selling social media to brand partners. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I had started doing a lot of consulting work for teams, many of whom became NBA teams, etc., and at Wasserman. And then my friend Amy Brooks from Teambo was like, hey, we do this, right, in the league. If you ever wanted to come to the league, we have this great group called Teambo, Team Marketing and Business Ops. And I just got enamored with it. And it seemed like it would be such a cool opportunity. I had spent 17 plus years of my career in agencies. It was like, let's go get a new seat. Let's go see what life is like from a chair in the league. And I loved it. I mean, I swear to God, I might still be at the NBA office today if I didn't have to live in New York. But, topic for another time. It was, it was really phenomenal. And actually, it's kind of what ignited my desire to be a team president here, and especially here in Boston with the legacy, because of the opportunity that you have to really drive change.
Yeah, it's really remarkable what not to just use this word because of the team that you're the president of, but the legacy that Teambo has in terms of not only the people that it's turned out, but the model that it's created for other sports to try to follow. But speaking of the legacy, before Tim gets to the closing questions, can you share a little about what you're trying to build there in Boston with this team, especially as it relates to building that fan base, which is a great market for the sport, of course. What's that relationship that you're building with that fan as you look to grow this particular organization in a mad sports city? In a positive way, I mean that.
Oh no, it's a rabid sports city, and that is one of the ingredients that makes this such a great opportunity. I think the other big ingredient, though, is that as an expansion team, we get to design this differently, and I think that's kind of one of the real opportunities in women's sports is sort of saying, okay, we now have a blank canvas, or we did 6-8 months ago. What does that fan look like? What does that fan want? How do they want to engage with players, with our team, with our brand? What do they want to wear? Like, we get to ask all those questions in a way that is not just as formulaic as I think in more established sports and sports fan bases. And this is kind of a unique opportunity for us to set that tone. You see this visualized in the design of our first two kits, our first two jerseys. One is a very strong, clear brand, green, literally it's called First Light. It is like literally the signal kit. The other kit is kind of a unique design that actually is designed with each one of the Boston's 23 neighborhoods and their outlines represented on the kit. And it allows for us to tell a different type of community story that is very local, that is very driven by what makes Boston Boston. And this is the intoxicating part of this opportunity, is that we get to build together with how fans want to consume women's pro sports in Boston. And they know what they want, and it's fantastic. And, and it is really, I think, a marriage made in heaven in so many ways with this town and this team.
Well, I have no doubt you will be tremendously successful doing that. Before we let you go, we have 2 questions we ask all our guests. So here goes part 1. How did you get your start in the sports industry?
Okay, so the real story of my entrance into the Cleveland Mafia is that my dad designed the world headquarters of IMG in Cleveland. It was actually a building, he was an architect, it was a building he designed and had his offices in as I was growing up. So I was literally running around his offices, kind of destined for it. And he happened to know, I don't know, some of the IMG guys, and I got that $6 an hour internship at IMG. And I'll tell you, I took it because there was just something about it that I knew it was going to be special, or I was going to learn something and end up broke on the streets of Hell's Kitchen. Either way.
Well, back at that time, you wouldn't have been the only person broken and living on the streets of Hell's Kitchen.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
And the last question, for somebody who's just coming out of school or maybe doing a career change, but looking to break into the sports industry, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Take the opportunity that matches your interests. It doesn't have to be the one that pays you the most. It won't necessarily be the one that, gives you the best next step, although it should. But take the opportunity and make everything of it. There's been several points in my career where I've taken a parallel opportunity or a flat role, and even taken a title down at times because I believed that in the long game of it. And I think that's really real in maximizing the opportunity that you get, whatever it is. We have an inside sales team that we recruited last summer. 6 of the 12 of them, it's their first job ever out of school. And these guys are making, quite frankly, the worst phone calls on the planet, calling, cold leads, asking them to buy tickets, and they're loving it. And the atmosphere and the environment and what they're learning is the best thing they could possibly learn in their first job in sports. Just take the opportunity and see where it goes.
Great advice.
Great. Appreciate that.
Jen, we can't thank you enough for coming on. Thank you so much. Thank you to your team, Dana and Sarah, for facilitating it. Best of luck the rest of the season and beyond. Can't wait to see great things on and off the pitch for Legacy FC.
Well, thank you both so much. It's great to be here. And Tim, great to see you again.
You too. We are back. Thank you again to Jennifer Van Dijk of Legacy FC, president of the newest NWSL franchise in Boston. David, now's the time in the show where we give shout outs, make corrections, look forward. What's on your mind?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, this is a big thanks to you. I'm sporting very proudly, Tim, my Jersey Mike's Naismith Award quarter zip, which I'm now love. So thank you for that, because I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the Naismith Awards. I'm a fan of Jersey Mike's. I'm a fan of quarter zips. I'll just say it. So
those are quite special, by the way. They were given out to our finalists this year for the high school player of the year, or first team All-Americans.
I feel special wearing it, and I'm continue to be happy about making my predictions on the Naismith Awards when we do our prediction shows. Couple shout outs. Starting with past guest Brooke Nunaviller and Major League Volleyball. They had their championship game, which they awarded $1 million to the winning team on. When we had Brooke on the show not all that long ago, Omaha Supernova, the team that she is a star on, weren't doing all that well. But man, they came on big towards the end of the season, made it all the way to the championship game, and in a 5-set match against the Dallas team, the Dallas Pulse, they fell. But it was a great run. Brooke played amazing, but Dallas was just a little stronger overall. But they had a nice packed house there at this facility in Frisco. The Dallas team seemed to have a bit of a home field advantage because of the location of that. But just wanted to give her a shout out in the league for getting to that final and doing it in kind of a unique way. A friend we've been begging to get on the show for a while, Steve Horowitz from Inner Circle Sports, just sold to William Blair. So congratulations to on that sale for his advisory folding into Chicago-based William Blair. I'm happy for Steve. That's a big deal. He and his partners run a great advisory operation in Inner Circle. So I'm not surprised that this ended up happening, and it feels like a good fit for them. What am I watching for? I mentioned previously that the PGA Championship is going to be played at Aronimink, which is very near where I grew up. So I'm excited to see how Aronimink shows. I was pretty happy going into the final round. There were 2 Wake Forest players in the final round of the tour event this past weekend, and they both kind of collapsed. One, Matt Fitzpatrick's brother, Alex, who was in the final round. And why do I always blank on Cam? Why is the other Cameron? I always want to say Cameron Smith.
Thomas?
It's Cameron No, it's Cameron. I look up. Hold on. Totally losing my Wake Forest creds. Cameron Young, right?
Yeah, right.
Is that what you said? Yeah.
I said Thomas.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry about that. And of course, Cameron Young, who completely had a rough final round, let's say it that way. Anyway, hopefully they'll be back and strong, and looking forward to seeing how that comes up. And then there's a whole slew of other business stories, which we kind of talked about before, that are clearly going to be interesting to follow. But I'll throw it back to you and see what you have your eye on.
Yeah, a couple quick hits. NFL and the refs came to an agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement, so we won't have to worry about another Fail Mary situation. I think that was absolutely critical for them to do. What else? I'm waiting for the prices to collapse on some FIFA World Cup matches. I think FIFA's been too cute by half in terms of the way they've been releasing tickets, and I think they're going to find themselves sitting on inventory as we get to match day and some matches and some markets and some matchups. And so I'm looking at that. And the last thing is boo to Nafisha Collier, a Minnesota Lynx, co-founder of the rival basketball league to the WNBA, or unrivaled, I should say, and vice president of the Players Association, who made some really critical, borderline personal insults to Kathy Engelbert during the early stages of those negotiations. And she subsequently came out after the collective bargaining agreement was ratified and signed, and said that, she did that for negotiating purposes, to gain leverage in the negotiations. And you and I have negotiated many, many things in our past. I don't think you've ever done a collective bargaining agreement. I know I haven't. But there are certain things you do and don't do as part of any negotiation. And one of them is make it personal. And she did. And I don't think that was good. Kathy Engelbert is not perfect by any means as commissioner, but she certainly didn't deserve that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And so it's not just the making it personal. I think it's the outright lying, if that is indeed the case. And I think it's gonna hurt her when it comes to things like endorsements and things like that. She won't be, because Nafisha Collier is an extremely, not only a talented player, but I think had been considered a very strong leader. But yeah, that's just absolutely bad form. And I'll also say that I think Kathy Engelbert is in a stronger position than we would have predicted she would be in. The WNBA season kicking off, and that Fever Wings game, I'm sure, did a very, very solid number, I would have to think, with the Paige Beckers and the Wings coming out on top of that. But and I think Kathy Engelbert went to one of the expansion games in Toronto. Find her in a little stronger position than, like I said, I would have guessed. But yeah, I agree with you. That's just bad form.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks again to Jen Van Dyke. Thank you to you, David. But most of all, thank you to our listeners. We couldn't do it without you. So if you like what you hear or like what you see, smash that like button, follow button, subscribe, whatever it is. You can check us out at dpandmcgee.com. Until next week, he's DP, I'm McGee, and we'll talk soon.